How many friends do you have? 20? 50? 500? 2,000? If your answer is anything above a few dozen, I have some bad news. They're probably not your friends. Yet every day, millions of people proudly announce they've reached another 1,000 friends. We celebrate milestones that would have sounded impossible just a generation ago. 5,000 Facebook friends, 10,000 followers, 100,000 subscribers, 1,000,000 people who know your name. But here's the uncomfortable question. How many of those people would answer the phone at 3 o'clock in the morning if your life had just fallen apart? How many would lend you money if you desperately needed it? How many would sit beside your hospital bed? How many would tell you the truth when everyone else is telling you what you want to hear? The answer for most of us is surprisingly small. Somewhere over the past 20 years, one of the most important words in the English language quietly changed its meaning. Not because dictionaries changed, not because human nature changed, because technology changed. The internet didn't just connect us, it redefined what a friend is, and many of us never even noticed it happening. Open almost any major English dictionary and you'll find a remarkably consistent definition of the word friend. One attached to another by affection or esteem. It's a wonderfully concise definition. Affection, esteem. Not convenience, not proximity, not shared Wi-Fi, not because somebody clicked a blue button on a website. Affection means genuine care. Esteem means respect. Together they describe something that has always required time to build. The English word friend comes from an Old English Freund, itself rooted in ancient Germanic languages and ultimately linked to a word meaning to love or to favour. People have been using some form of this word for well over 1,000 years. Throughout history, the meaning remained remarkably stable. A friend wasn't simply someone you knew. A friend was someone who mattered, someone trusted, someone valued, someone whose happiness affected your own. In many cultures, friendship was regarded almost as sacred. Greek philosophers wrote about it. Religious leaders praised it. Kings relied upon it. Wars were fought beside it. Friendship wasn't casual, it was earned. Real friendship has never been instant. It develops slowly. Trust isn't downloaded. Respect isn't automatic. Neither can be requested with a single click. Historically, friendship was tested over time. People discovered whether someone kept their promises, whether they stayed loyal when things became difficult, whether they could be trusted with secrets, whether they celebrated your successes instead of secretly envying them, whether they disappeared when life became inconvenient. Friendship wasn't measured by how often someone agreed with you. It was measured by whether they remained beside you when disagreement became uncomfortable. Real friends occasionally disappoint us. They tell us things we'd rather not hear. Sometimes they criticize us. Sometimes they challenge us. Sometimes they stop us making terrible mistakes. Because genuine friendship isn't built on constant approval. It's built on honesty. That is precisely why true friendships often take years to form, and why losing one can be genuinely heartbreaking. For centuries, English had another perfectly useful word, acquaintance. An acquaintance is someone you know. Perhaps you've met them, worked with them, gone to school together, seen them regularly. You recognize each other. You may even enjoy talking. But trust, loyalty, deep affection, not necessarily. The distinction mattered. Someone could have hundreds of acquaintances and only a handful of friends. Nobody found that strange. In fact, that was considered perfectly normal. Because friendship wasn't about quantity. It was about quality. Then came the internet. At first, online communities simply connected people. Forums, chat rooms, message boards. People knew one another by usernames. Most never imagined these strangers were actually their friends. But then something happened that forever changed the language of the internet. One simple word. Friend. Suddenly becoming someone's friend no longer required trust or loyalty or years of shared experience. It required just one click, one request, one acceptance. And overnight, one of humanity's deepest relationships became one of its easiest transactions. It was brilliant marketing, but it was also one of the most successful redefinitions of language in modern history. That's where the story gets really interesting. So, who made the decision that the people connected to us online would be called friends? The idea didn't begin with Facebook. Early social networking sites in the late 1990s and early 2000s experimented with ways of describing online relationships. Sites such as 6 Degrees allowed people to map out their personal networks, and the language of friendship began creeping into the online world. But it was Facebook that transformed the word into something almost universal. When Facebook launched in 2004, its founders had a choice. They could have called these connections contacts, or connections, or followers, or even acquaintances. Every one of those words would have been more technically accurate. Instead, they chose perhaps the warmest word in the English language, friend. It was a masterstroke, because nobody dreams of collecting acquaintances, nobody boasts about having 2,000 contacts, nobody feels emotionally attached to a list of connections. But friends? Friends are different. The word carries warmth, acceptance, belonging. It suggests that someone knows you, likes you, and wants to remain connected with you. That single choice of vocabulary changed how millions of people thought about themselves. Words matter, far more than we often realize. Imagine 2 buttons. One says, "Become my acquaintance." The other says, "Become my friend." Which would you click? The answer seems obvious. The second feels personal, the first feels distant. That emotional response wasn't accidental. Humans are social creatures. Our brains constantly search for signs that were accepted by a group. For hundreds of thousands of years, belonging to the group meant survival. Being rejected often meant death. Although modern society has changed dramatically, our brains haven't evolved nearly as quickly. Every notification, every accepted friend request, every positive comment, every like acts as a tiny signal that we belong. Our brains reward that feeling, sometimes with surprising intensity. There's another reason why social media embraced the word friend: attention. Every social media platform survives by encouraging people to return again and again and again. The more often we visit, the longer we stay, the more advertisements we see, the more valuable we become to the platform. Friendship becomes part of that business model. Once somebody became your online friend, they gained certain privileges. Depending on your privacy setting, they could see photographs that strangers couldn't, read your personal updates, celebrate your birthdays, comment on your family, receive notifications about your activity, appear in your digital life every single day. They didn't need to knock on your front door. The platform quietly opened one for them. And because becoming friend was so effortless, many people accumulated hundreds, then thousands, without ever stopping to ask whether these people were actually friends at all. Perhaps the biggest change wasn't simply the word, it was that friendship became measurable. For most of human history, nobody knew exactly how many friends another person had. There wasn't a scoreboard. Today, there is. Your profile proudly displays the number 500 friends, 1,000 friends, 3,000 friends. Without realizing it, many people began treating friendship as a competition. The higher the number, the greater the perceived success. Some people accept almost every friend request they receive, not because they know the person, not because they trust them, but because bigger numbers somehow feel better. The number itself becomes rewarding, yet ask yourself something. If your house caught fire tonight, would all 1,000 friends arrive with buckets of water? Or would most simply click the sad face emoji tomorrow morning? And this is where the story begins to take a darker turn. Once we've accepted that these people are our friends, something else quietly happens. We begin expecting them to behave like friends, to encourage us, to support us, to celebrate our successes, to comfort us when life hurts. But social media isn't designed around deep relationships, it's designed around attention. And when the attention doesn't arrive, when the likes are fewer than expected, when nobody comments, or when somebody else's post receives far more approval than ours, our brains don't interpret it as an algorithm. They often interpret it as rejection. One of the greatest dangers of social media isn't that it connects us. It's that it can convince us we're connected when we're not. Human beings don't simply need attention, we need presence. A screen cannot give you a hug. A notification cannot hold your hand. An emoji cannot sit beside you through grief. Yet our brains can easily confuse online interaction with genuine human closeness. When hundreds of people wish us happy birthday, it feels wonderful, and it should. There's nothing wrong with enjoying kind words, but if those hundreds disappear the moment life becomes difficult, were they ever really your friends? Loneliness is one of the defining social problems of the modern world. Ironically, it has grown during the same period that we've become more digitally connected than at any other point in human history. This doesn't mean social media causes loneliness. For many people, it provides genuine community, especially across long distances or during periods of isolation. It can reconnect old classmates, help families stay close, introduce people who later become lifelong friends. There are real benefits. The danger comes when online interaction begins replacing face-to-face relationships instead of supporting them. A full contact list is not the same thing as a full life. There's another trap hidden inside social media. Approval becomes visible. In everyday life, appreciation is often quiet. A smile, a conversation, a thank you. Online, approval comes with numbers. 20 likes, 100 comments, 3,000 views. For some people, those numbers slowly become a measure of self-worth. If people liked my photograph, perhaps they liked me. If nobody commented, perhaps nobody cares. That's an incredibly heavy burden to place on people who may barely know us. And remember, many of the people seeing our posts aren't ignoring us out of malice. They may never have seen the post at all. Algorithms decide what appears in front of us. People are busy. They may be working, raising children, caring for elderly patients, or dealing with struggles we know nothing about. Silence online is not always rejection, but emotionally it can feel like it. Especially for someone who's already lonely or anxious or struggling with depression. That's why it's so important not to build your self-esteem on digital applause, because applause is fleeting. Character lasts. So, how do you recognize a genuine friend? Not someone who clicks like, not someone who comments with a thumbs up emoji, a real friend. Here are a few things worth looking for. A real friend is happy when you succeed, not secretly resentful. A real friend tells you the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. A real friend keeps your confidence. They don't trade your private life for gossip. A real friend remembers the promises they made. They show up when it matters, not only when it's convenient. A real friend respects your boundaries. They don't manipulate you with guilt. They don't disappear because you disagreed with them. And perhaps most importantly, a real friend makes you a better person, not by constantly praising you, but by helping you become the person you're capable of becoming. Friendship is less about agreement and much more about commitment. Years ago, I was given a piece of advice that stayed with me ever since. Father Joe Young looked at me and, quoting his father, said, "If you can count your friends on more than one hand, you're living a life of deception." At first, the statement sounded almost unbelievable, but the older I've become, the more I understand what he meant. He wasn't saying we shouldn't know hundreds of people. He wasn't saying we shouldn't enjoy social media. He wasn't even suggesting we stop meeting new people. He was reminding me that friendship is extraordinarily rare. Real friendship demands time, trust, shared experience, forgiveness, loyalty, mutual respect. These things cannot be manufactured by software. They cannot be measured by follower counts. And they certainly cannot be created by clicking an accept friend request button. So enjoy social media, reconnect with old classmates, celebrate your interests, share your photographs, meet new people. Just don't confuse accessibility with intimacy, or visibility with loyalty, or followers with friends. Because when life is at its very best, and especially when life is at its very worst, you'll discover something that no social media platform has ever been able to measure. The people who matter most are usually the ones you could count on one hand. If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing and let me know in the comments how many people would you trust with the keys to your house and your deepest secrets. Because that number may be much closer to your real number of friends than anything you'll ever find on social media.